Nobody noticed the human walk-in. That was the thing about Horizon's Edge. The trade station was built for big species. The corridors were 12 feet wide. The chairs were made for creatures with tails and armored backs. The air recyclers pumped oxygen mixed with trace gases to keep 40 different species comfortable. In a place like this, a 5'6" human woman carrying a kit bag over one shoulder was basically invisible. Nora Beckett preferred it that way. She stepped off the transport shuttle and moved through the docking level without stopping. Around her, aliens of every shape and size pushed past each other on their way to trade halls, cantinas, and service decks. A pair of Gorith dock workers, each one built like a refrigerator covered in gray hide, almost walked right through her without seeing her. Nora sidestepped without looking up and kept moving. She had memorized the station layout during the shuttle ride. Deck 9, Corridor 14, Suite 4. That was where she would find her assignment. Ambassador Lynn Sura was waiting at the door. She was Fessari, which meant she was tall and thin, with translucent skin that showed pale blue veins underneath. Her bones looked like they might snap in a strong wind. When she saw Nora, her dark eyes widened with something that might have been relief. "You are the human escort," Len said. "Nora Beckett, Trade Union Security Division." Len opened the door and gestured her inside. The suite was plain but clean. A table, 2 chairs, a window that looked out at the swirling orange surface of the gas giant below. "I requested you specifically," Len said, sitting down carefully. "Not you personally, a human. I read the classified reports from the border conflict. What your species did during the siege at Relay Point 7. Nora set her bag down. "That was a bad day. You held a corridor against 30 armed combatants for 9 hours. It was a long day." Len studied her for a moment, and she almost smiled. "I see. You are one of those humans who does not enjoy talking about themselves." Nora pulled a chair out and sat across from her. "Tell me about the negotiations. Who are we dealing with?" "The Toron Dominion. They want exclusive mining rights in the Ven sector. My government believes the resources should remain in neutral hands." The Toron disagree. They disagree loudly. "Security presence?" Their delegation brought a full team, led by their security commander, a warrior named Drav Mokin. "What I need to know about him?" Len hesitated. "He is large, even for a Toron. He has a reputation for settling arguments with his fists, and he has never lost. He considers species smaller than his own to be beneath his attention." Nora nodded slowly. "Anything else?" "He has never met a human before." "Good," Nora said. She did not explain what she meant by that. 3 decks above them, in the station's security hub, Drav Mokin was watching the camera feeds. He filled his chair the way a boulder fills a hole. 7 feet of dark iron-colored scales, arms as thick as Nora's entire body, a jaw built like the front of a battering ram. His eyes were small, sharp, and set deep beneath a heavy brow ridge. Bryn Avik, his second in command, stood behind him. Bryn was smaller than Drav by a full head, which still made him enormous by human standards. Drav pointed at the screen, showing Nora walking in a lens suite. "What is that?" "The Fessari ambassador's new escort," Bryn said. "That is a bodyguard?" Drav laughed. It sounded like rocks grinding together. "She is the size of a child. A Toron child." "What does she weigh?" 50 standard units. 62, according to the docking manifest. Drav shook his head. "The Fessari hired a pet." Bryn was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke carefully. "I served on a joint patrol vessel 6 years ago. There was a human on the crew, an engineer, when a bulkhead collapsed during a reactor leak. I watched him lift 200 standard units of twisted metal off a wounded crew member with his bare hands. His muscles were tearing, and he did not stop." Drav waved one massive hand. "Stories. Every species has stories about their own kind. It means nothing. I saw it with my own eyes, Commander." "Then your eyes were wrong." Bryn said nothing more. He knew that voice. It was the voice Drav used when the conversation was over. On the screen, Nora was unpacking her kit bag. Equipment, clothes, a small medical pouch. Nothing that looked like a weapon. Drav watched her for another few seconds, then switched to a different feed. She was not worth his attention. But just before the feed changed, something happened. Nora stopped what she was doing and looked up. Not at Len. not at the window. She looked directly into the security camera mounted in the corner of the ceiling. She stared into it for a full 3 seconds. Her face was calm. Her eyes were steady. There was no fear in them, no confusion, no performance. She had known the camera was there the entire time. Drav felt something shift in his chest. A small, cold sensation, like a single drop of ice water running down his spine. He did not know the word for it, because he had never felt it before. He switched the feed and forgot about it. Or tried to. The trade hall smelled like burnt metal and alien sweat. Nora stood 2 steps behind Ambassador Len's chair, hands folded in front of her, face blank. She had worn her standard-issue black uniform with no armor and no visible weapons. This was a diplomatic function. Appearances mattered. She looked like an assistant, maybe a secretary. That was fine. Across the table, 6 Tauron delegates sat in reinforced chairs that groaned under their weight. They wore ceremonial chest plates made from some dark alloy that caught the overhead lights. Every one of them was armed. Curved blades hung from their belts. It was, according to Tauron custom, a sign of respect. You brought weapons to show you considered the other side worthy of caution. Nobody had brought weapons for Nora. The negotiations started badly and got worse. The lead Tauron delegate, a broad-faced male named Goran, slammed his fist on the table hard enough to crack the surface layer. He wanted the Ven sector. He wanted it entirely. Len explained, in her calm and measured voice, that the Galactic Trade Union could not grant exclusive rights to a sector that bordered 3 neutral territories. Goran did not care about neutral territories. He cared about the mineral deposits buried under the ice moons, and he said so in a voice that shook the water glasses. Nora watched everything. She tracked the positions of the 6 delegates. She noted which ones kept touching their blades out of habit and which ones sat still. She measured the distance from her position to the nearest exit. 7 meters. She measured the distance to Len. 1 meter. She measured the distance to the nearest Tauron. 4 meters. She did all of this without moving her eyes. When a session broke for a recess, the delegates filed out into the wide corridor outside the trade hall. Len remained seated, reviewing notes on her datapad. Nora stayed at her post. Then Drav Moken walked in. He did not enter rooms. He occupied them. The air seemed to get heavier when he stepped through the doorway. His footsteps made the floor vibrate. He was wearing full security armor, black and scarred from use, and he moved with the easy confidence of someone who had never been challenged by anything he could not break. He walked directly to Nora. He stopped less than a meter away and looked down at her. The height difference was absurd. His chest was level with her face. His shadow covered her completely. "You are the human," he said. His voice was deep enough to feel in her bones. "I am," Nora said. "The bodyguard." "Yes." Drav tilted his head. Behind him, 2 Tauron officers had stopped to watch. In the corridor beyond, other aliens were slowing down, sensing something interesting. "Tell me," Drav said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "If someone tried to harm your ambassador right now, what would you do?" Nora looked up at him. She had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "I would stop them." Drav's mouth split into a grin that showed rows of flat, grinding teeth. "You? You could not stop a door from closing." Laughter from the corridor. The 2 Tauron officers behind Drav exchanged amused looks. A group of Gorth traders nudged each other. Nora said nothing. She did not smile. She did not frown. She waited. Drav leaned closer. His breath was hot and smelled like copper. "On my world, creatures your size are kept as livestock. We feed them grain, and they grow fat, and we eat them at the harvest festival. Tell me, human, are you the livestock of your planet?" The corridor had gone quiet now. Even the aliens who had been laughing looked uncomfortable. This was not playful teasing. This was humiliation delivered in public by someone who knew no one would challenge him. Nora held his gaze. She did not step back. She did not blink. When she spoke, her voice was quiet, and everyone in that corridor had to lean in to hear it. "On my world," she said, "the most dangerous predators are not always the biggest. Some of them are small. Some of them are quiet. And by the time you realize what they are, it is already too late." She paused. "I suggest you remember that." Something flickered across Drav's face. Not fear. Not yet. Just a crack in the amusement, like a chip in stone. It was there for half a second and then gone. He straightened up, snorted, and walked away. His officers followed. The corridor returned to normal. Aliens moved on. The moment passed. Bryn Avik, who had watched the entire exchange from a side corridor, did not move on. He stood very still, looking at the spot where Nora had stood her ground against a creature that outweighed her by 300 pounds. He had seen the way her hands had been positioned during the entire conversation. Loose, open, fingers slightly curled. He had seen that stance before. Not from diplomats, not from assistants, from fighters, from people who were ready to move at any moment and were choosing not to. Inside the trade hall, Lynn looked up from her datapad. "Are you all right?" "Fine," Nora said. She sat down across from the ambassador. "I have been insulted by worse." "He is dangerous, Nora." "Yes." "Does that concern you?" Nora considered this for a moment. Then she said, "He is big and he is strong, and he has never lost a fight. That means he has never learned what to do when he is losing. That concerns me." "For him." Lynn stared at her. Then she went back to her notes. Under the table, Nora's hands rested on her knees. They were perfectly steady. It fell apart on the second day. The trade hall was hotter than the day before. Someone had adjusted the climate controls to favor Toron comfort, which meant the temperature had climbed by 15 degrees and the air felt thick enough to chew. Lynn was sweating through her diplomatic robes. Nora's uniform was damp at the collar. Neither of them complained. The Toron delegation, however, was comfortable, and comfortable Toron were aggressive Toron. Goran opened the session by rejecting every proposal Lynn had put forward the previous day. He did not explain why. He simply said no to each one after another, like he was swatting insects off a table. His junior officers sat behind him with their arms crossed and their jaws set. Lynn stayed calm. She rephrased her positions. She offered new terms. She spoke with the kind of patience that takes years to build, the kind that bends but does not break. It was not enough. A young Toron officer named Drin stood up from behind Gorn's chair. He was smaller than Drav, but still enormous by any human measure. His scales were lighter, almost bronze, and his eyes burned with the particular fury of someone who wanted to prove himself in front of his superiors. "The Fessari speak in circles," Dren said. "They offer nothing and call it diplomacy. This is not negotiation. This is deception." The room went cold. Lynn stood. She kept her voice even. "We have offered 3 separate frameworks for shared resource access. Each one is more than fair. I suggest we review them with fresh eyes and return tomorrow." She turned to leave. Nora moved with her, one step behind, angled so she could see the entire room in her peripheral vision. Dren moved fast for his size. He came around the table in 3 steps and grabbed Lynn's arm above the elbow. His grip was a vice made of scale and bone. Lynn gasped. The sound was small and sharp, the sound of someone whose fragile bones were being compressed by something that could crush stone. Everything after that happened in sequence. Nora stepped forward. There was no hesitation, no moment of decision. Her body moved the way water moves when a dam breaks. She reached Drin's arm and locked his wrist with both hands, twisting the joint inward against its natural rotation. Toron anatomy was different from human anatomy, but joints were joints, and they all had a direction they did not want to go. Drin released Lynn. His face twisted in surprise and pain. Then he swung at Nora. His free arm came around in a wide arc, a sledgehammer of scaled muscle aimed at the side of her head. If it had connected, it would have killed her. It did not connect. Nora dropped her center of gravity, ducking under the swing, so close that she felt the air move above her hair. She came up inside his reach, where his size meant nothing, and hit him twice. The first strike went to the soft tissue under his arm, where the scales were thinnest and the nerve bundle sat close to the surface. The second strike hit the back of his knee, a sharp downward kick that buckled the joint. Drin went down on one knee. His eyes were wide. He did not understand what had just happened. Nora was already moving Lynn toward the door when Drav arrived. He had been standing by the far wall, watching. When Drin fell, something in Drav snapped. Not because he cared about the junior officer. Because a Toron warrior had been dropped by the tiny creature he had mocked the day before, and everyone in the room had seen it. Drav crossed the room in 4 strides. He grabbed Nora's shoulder from behind and shoved her. Hard. She flew backward 2 meters and hit the edge of the conference table with her lower back. It hurt. She let it hurt. Then she pushed off the table and turned to face him. Drav was already closing the distance. His teeth were bared. His hands were clenched into fists the size of Nora's head. Every Tauron in the room was watching. Every alien in the room was watching. Drav threw a straight right. Full power. No holding back. A blow that had broken the ribs of armored opponents, that had cracked the shell of a Gorith mercenary, that had ended every fight Drav had ever been in. The first second, Nora slipped left. The fist passed her right ear, close enough to feel the heat of it. She stepped inside his reach, planting her lead foot between his feet. The second, she drove the heel of her palm into his throat. Not hard enough to crush, hard enough to shock. His body seized for a fraction of a heartbeat, every muscle locking up in reflex. In that fraction, she pivoted and drove her elbow into the center of his chest, right where the scales parted at the sternum. The third second, she kicked the inside of his knee. The same kick she had used on Dren, but harder. Drav's leg folded. His balance was already gone from the throat strike. Gravity did the rest. Drav Mokin, 7 feet tall, 340 pounds, undefeated security commander of the Tauron Dominion, hit the floor like a collapsing building. The sound echoed through the trade hall. Then there was silence. Nora stood over him. Her hands were still up. Her breathing was controlled. She was not shaking. She was not smiling. She looked down at Drav the way a surgeon looks at a patient on a table. Clinical. Professional. Done. Drav stared up at her. His throat was on fire. His chest felt like it had been hit by a piston. His knee screamed. He tried to get up, and his body refused. Nora held his gaze for 1 second. Then she turned, took Lynn gently by the arm, and walked her out of the trade hall. She did not look back. Behind her, 20 aliens from 8 different species stood in absolute silence, staring at the most feared warrior on the station lying on the floor, put there by a creature half his size in the time it takes to blink. Nobody laughed. The footage hit the station network in 40 minutes. Someone in the trade hall had been wearing a personal recording device. Within an hour, every species on Horizon's Edge had seen the clip. A small human female dropping the Tauron security commander in 3 seconds flat. The video was grainy, shot from an angle that made Drav look even bigger and Nora even smaller. That made it worse. Or better, depending on who was watching. In Suite 4 on Deck 9, Nora was wrapping a cold compress around Len's arm. The bruise from Dren's grip was already turning dark purple against the ambassador's pale blue skin. Fessari bruised easily and healed slowly. Nothing is broken, Nora said, pressing gently along the bone. But you should keep it still for a day or 2. Len watched Nora work. You are injured too. I hit a table. It is nothing. You hit a table because a 300-pound warrior threw you into it. Nora shrugged. Tables do not hit back. Lynn was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I read the reports about humans. I thought they were exaggerated. Propaganda, perhaps. Something your species created to seem more dangerous than you are. She paused. I was wrong. Nora sealed the compress and sat back. The reports are not propaganda. They're actually toned down. Command does not like advertising what we can do. Makes the other species nervous. That night, Nora sat alone in her quarters and opened a comm link to Earth. The signal took 4 seconds to bounce through the relay network. When the screen flickered to life, the face of Captain Hald Reeves appeared. He was in his 60s, gray-haired, square-jawed, sitting in what looked like a cluttered home office. Beckett, he said, I saw the video. Already, it is the most watched clip on 3 relay networks. You are famous. Wonderful. Reeves leaned forward. His expression shifted from amusement to concern. Listen to me. The Tauron do not process humiliation the way we do. For us, losing a fight means you train harder. For them, it means someone has to pay. That warrior you put down is going to come after you, or his people will. I know. Do not apologize. Do not show weakness. And do not assume this is over because the fight is. I know, Captain. Good. Stay sharp, Beckett. Reeves out. The screen went dark. Nora sat in silence for a long time, staring at the wall. 3 decks up, Drav Mokin was sitting in the medical bay. A Tauron medic had examined his throat and chest. Bruised tissue, no structural damage. His knee was swollen but functional. Physically, he would recover in 2 days. His pride would take longer. Bren came in and stood by the door. He did not speak. He did not need to. His presence said everything. I warned you. You did not listen. Now here we are. Drav stared at the ceiling. Ow, he said. Bren waited. She weighs 62 units. I weigh 340. I have fought creatures 3 times her size and won. How? Bren pulled a chair over and sat down. Because she was not trying to overpower you. She was trying to dismantle you. There is a difference. Drav turned his head to look at him. Explain. You fight by being stronger than your opponent. Every Tauron does. We are built for it. She does not fight that way. She fights by being faster, by knowing where to strike, and by using your own strength against you. You threw a punch with everything you had. She used that force to create an opening. Your power became her weapon. Drav was quiet for a long time. After Bren left, Drav pulled up the station's information archive on his datapad and searched for one word: humans. What he found kept him reading until station dawn. Earth, a world with a gravity index of 1.0, which sounded unremarkable until he realized that most species in the galactic community evolved on worlds with gravity between 0.4 and 0.7. Humans grew up under nearly double the gravitational force of an average inhabited planet. Their bones were dense. Their muscles were compressed and efficient. They were, by galactic standards, built like creatures meant to survive a world that was actively trying to kill them. And that world had been trying to kill them. Earth's predator-to-prey ratio was among the highest recorded. Venomous creatures, pack hunters, ambush predators in every climate zone. Humans had not evolved at the top of their food chain by being the biggest or the strongest. They had evolved by being relentless. They could track prey for days without stopping. They could function through injuries that would shut down most species. They could adapt their fighting style to any opponent, any terrain, any situation. But the detail that made Drav set the datapad down was this. Humans have been fighting each other for their entire recorded history. Thousands of years of organized warfare. They had turned combat into a science. They had built entire systems of hand-to-hand fighting, refined over centuries, designed to allow a smaller fighter to defeat a larger one. Nora had not gotten lucky. She had not used a trick. She had used 10,000 years of accumulated human knowledge about how to take down something bigger than herself. And she had done it so fast that he had not even understood what was happening until he was on the floor. Drav pulled up the security footage of the fight. He watched it once, twice, 10 times. He slowed it down frame by frame. There, that moment, half a second before she struck his throat. Her eyes locked onto his. He froze the image and stared at it. There was no anger in those eyes. No fear. No hatrith. Just certainty. She had known she was going to win before she threw the first strike. Drav set the datapad down and sat in the dark medical bay, alone, thinking about what it meant to be a predator that looked like prey. Nora noticed the new faces on the third morning. She had a habit that most people mistook for boredom. When she walked through a space, she cataloged it. Faces, positions, patterns. The brain filed it all away without being asked. So when she walked through the docking level on day 3 and saw 4 Tauron she had never seen before standing near a cargo bay that had been locked the previous day, something cold settled in her stomach. They were not wearing delegation uniforms. Their armor was matte black, unmarked, and their blades were not ceremonial. They were shorter than standard Tauron sidearms, built for close work in tight spaces. Nora kept walking. She did not look at them directly. She counted them in her peripheral vision, noted their positions, and moved on. Back in the suite, she pulled up the station's maintenance logs on Len's datapad. Corridor access records showed that a service tunnel running beneath the diplomatic wing had been opened at 3 in the morning. The access code used was Tauron military. She checked the camera network next. 2 cameras in the lower corridors had gone offline overnight. Maintenance had not been called to fix them. Nobody had reported the outage. Nora sat very still for a full minute. Then she stood up and told Lynn to lock the door and not open it for anyone except her. What is happening? Lynn asked. Probably nothing. I want to be sure. She left before Lynn could ask more questions. Nora went to the security hub on deck 12. She did not go to the front desk. She went to the back corridor where the senior offices were located and stopped outside the door marked with Toron script. She knocked once. Drav opened the door. He looked down at her. His expression was complicated. There was still anger in it, buried deep, but there was something else now too. Something that had not been there before the fight. I need to talk to you, Nora said. Then talk. Not in the corridor. He stepped aside. His office was sparse. A desk, a chair built for his frame, a wall-mounted display showing station schematics. Nora walked in and did not sit down. You have people on this station that are not part of your delegation, she said. Drav's eyes narrowed. What people? For that I have seen. Matte black armor, unmarked, carrying close-quarters blades. They arrived sometime in the last 12 hours. 2 surveillance cameras near the diplomatic wing went dark overnight, and someone used a Toron military code to access the service tunnels at 3 in the morning. Drav was very still. His jaw tightened. They are not yours, Nora said. It was not a question. No. Do you know who they belong to? Drav exhaled slowly. It sounded like air escaping a furnace. There is a faction within the Dominion. Hardliners. They believe the Vin sector negotiations are a waste of time. They want to take the sector by force and deal with the consequences later. And the video of me putting you on the floor gave them the excuse they needed. Drav flinched. Just barely. A Toron commander humiliated by a human in front of 20 witnesses. Yes, it gave them fuel. They will frame it as an attack on Toron honor. Their response will be to kill the ambassador and make an example of you. On a neutral station, they do not care about neutral ground. They care about sending a message. Nora folded her arms. How many? If it is who I think it is, they send a kill team. 6 to 8 operatives. Fast, quiet, trained for assassination rather than open combat. When will they move? Station night cycle. When the corridors are empty and security is thin. They looked at each other. The silence was heavy with everything that had happened between them. The mockery, the fight, the fall. All of it was still there, sitting in the room like a third person. Nora spoke first. I'm not here to ask for help. I am here because if these people kill the ambassador on your station, while you're the security commander, it will not be the hardliners who pay the price. It will be you, and your career, and every legitimate Toron interest in the Ven sector. Drav said nothing for a long time. Then he pressed a comm button on his desk. Bryn, my office. Now. Bryn arrived in under a minute. If he was surprised to see Nora standing in Drav's office, he did not show it. Tell him what you told me, Drav said. Nora repeated the information. Bryn listened without interrupting. When she finished, he nodded. I have been monitoring the Hardliner network for 2 months, Bryn said. The chatter increased after the video spread. They are calling it the human incident. They are using it to justify action. Drav leaned back in his chair. The metal groaned. Then we stopped them before they reached the diplomatic wing. Nora unfolded her arms. I have a plan, but it requires you to follow my lead on tactics. Drav's jaw tightened again, taking tactical orders from a human who had humiliated him. Every fiber of his pride rebelled against it. But he was a soldier, and soldiers did what the mission required. Talk, he said. They planned for 2 hours. Nora led. She drew the station corridors from memory, marked choke points, identified angles of approach. Drav provided security codes and personnel. Bryn filled in gaps with intelligence on the hardliner operatives. When they finished, Nora stood and checked the time. Night cycle was 6 hours away. She moved toward the door. Drav stopped her with a word. Human. She turned. Are you afraid? Nora looked at him. Yes. Always. Then why do you do this? Because being afraid and doing it anyway is what we are built for. She left. Drav sat in his chair, turning that sentence over in his mind, and realized it was the most frightening thing he had ever heard. The station lights dimmed to half strength at 2200 hours. Night cycle. The corridors emptied. The trade halls locked. Horizon's edge went quiet the way a held breath goes quiet, full of things waiting to happen. Nora was in position by 2150. She had taped her knuckles, checked her boots, and tied her hair back so tight it pulled at her scalp. She wore no armor. Armor slowed her down, and speed was the only advantage she had against opponents who could break her in half with one clean hit. Drav and Bryn had positioned 4 loyal Tauron guards at the 2 main access points leading to the diplomatic wing. Nora had placed herself in the service tunnel below, the one the hardliners had scouted the night before. If she was right, they would come through here first. Take out the cameras, move through the guts of the station, come up behind the guards. She was right. At 2217, she heard them. Heavy footsteps, trying to be light. The scrape of scaled shoulders against narrow walls. Breathing that was deep and controlled, but still too loud for the silence. 6 of them, moving in pairs. Close formation. Nora pressed herself into an alcove where a water pipe jutted from the wall and waited. The first pair passed her. The second pair passed her. She let them go. She wanted the rear pair. Cut the tail, and the snake cannot retreat. The last 2 operatives moved past her alcove. Nora stepped out behind them and hit the trailing one in the back of the neck, right at the gap between his helmet and his collar plate. He dropped without a sound. His partner turned, and Nora was already inside his guard. She drove her knee into his thigh, grabbed the back of his head, and slammed his face into the pipe. He went down heavy. 2 down, 4 ahead. They had heard the noise. The tunnel erupted. The remaining 4 operatives turned in the narrow space, blades drawn. Nora backed up, keeping the tight walls on either side of her. In the open, for Tauron would surround her and she would die. In a tunnel barely wide enough for 2 of them to stand side by side, their numbers meant nothing. The first one lunged. Nora sidestepped his blade, caught his wrist, and redirected his momentum into the wall. His head cracked against the metal. She spun and kicked the second one in the knee. He buckled. The third one swung wide, and his blade sparked against the ceiling. Nora ducked, grabbed a loose pipe fitting from the floor, and drove it into the soft spot under his arm. He howled. The fourth one was smarter. He hung back, let his wounded teammates create chaos, and waited for an opening. When Nora was tangled with the third operative, the fourth one came in fast and low. His blade caught her left forearm. The cut was deep and immediate. Blood ran hot down her wrist and over her fingers. Nora did not stop. She twisted away from the blade, drove her elbow into the third operative's jaw to clear space, and faced the fourth one in the narrow tunnel. He was the leader. She could tell by the way he held himself. Calm, patient, dangerous in a way the others were not. He was also twice her size and fully armored. He came at her with precision, not rage. Short, controlled strikes. He was good, better than Drav. He fought like someone who had trained for this, not someone who relied on being bigger. Nora took a hit to the ribs. Something cracked. Pain exploded through her left side like electricity. She gasped, stumbled, and caught herself against the wall. The leader paused. He expected her to go down. Every species he had ever fought would have gone down. Nora did not go down. She shifted her weight to favor the broken rib, adjusted her stance so her right side faced him, and raised her bloody hands. Her face was pale and slick with sweat. Her breathing was ragged. Blood dripped from her fingertips and made small dark circles on the floor. But her eyes were the same as they had always been. Steady, certain, alive. She came at him, not with power, with everything her species had spent 10,000 years perfecting. She used the walls, bouncing off one to change her angle. She used the low ceiling, ducking where he could not. She used the pipes and conduits, grabbing them for leverage, swinging around them to land strikes from directions that should not have been possible. The leader landed 2 more hits, one to her shoulder, one to her hip. Nora absorbed them both and kept coming. He could not understand it. She was broken and bleeding, and she kept coming. That was when the fear hit him. Not fear of her fists, fear of what she was. A creature that did not know how to stop. Nora feinted left and went right. She caught his blade arm, twisted it against the joint until something popped, and drove her forehead into the bridge of his nose. Tauron noses were not armored. Cartilage shattered. The leader staggered. Nora kicked his knee out from under him, and he went down. She stood over him, gasping, bleeding from 3 wounds, one rib broken, her left arm nearly useless. She stood over him and did not fall. Drav arrived 30 seconds later with Bryn and the guards. They found 6 unconscious hardliners and Nora leaning against the tunnel wall with her eyes closed and blood pooling at her feet. When she heard Drav's footsteps, she opened her eyes and said, "Tunnel is clear." Drav looked at the 6 bodies on the ground. Then he looked at her. He did not speak for a very long time. Station security took the hardliners into custody within the hour. Lynn was safe. The Toron delegation formally disavowed the kill team. The trade negotiations resumed 2 days later, and this time, every alien at the table treated the Fesari ambassador with careful, measured respect. Nora was in the medical bay, getting her arm stitched when Drav found her. He stood in the doorway, filling it completely, and watched the medic work. When the medic finished and left, Drav stepped inside. "On my world," he said, "when a warrior earns the respect of their enemy, they are given a name, a title that other warriors will know." He paused. "I would give you one." Nora looked up at him. "What is it?" "It does not translate perfectly. The closest meaning in your language would be the small blade that cuts deepest." Nora held his gaze. "I prefer just Nora." "I know," Drav said, "but the name is not for you. It is for us. So we remember." Nora almost smiled. Almost. 3 weeks later, a revised entry appeared in the Toron Military Threat Assessment Database. The species classification for humans was changed from Minimal Threat, Category 6, to Apex Predator, Category 1. The entry included a single recommendation in bold text. Do not engage without overwhelming force. Do not underestimate based on size. Do not assume surrender. The entry was signed by Security Commander Drav Mokin.